Dr. Elias Varan adjusted the straps of his exploration pack as he stepped carefully through the dense forest. The canopy above shimmered in shades of green and gold, and the air was filled with a fragrance that was both sweet and sharp, unlike anything found on Earth. This planet, Aradia 7, had been colonized by humans only a few decades ago, but its wildlife and flora remained mostly untouched, mysterious and beautiful. Elias had come here not just as a scientist, but as someone who believed in the quiet magic of life itself. The forest was alive with gentle sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant hum of luminescent insects, and the soft, musical chirps of tiny creatures darting through the underbrush. Elias was careful to tread lightly. Even a human step could damage the fragile ecosystem. He had been studying alien plant life for years, fascinated by how it could adapt and flourish in ways that human technology could not replicate. But today, he was here for something far more unusual than plants. A faint sound caught his attention. It was delicate, almost imperceptible, a soft melodic whimper. He paused, scanning the area with a practiced eye. The noise came from a small clearing up ahead. There, illuminated by a shaft of sunlight piercing through the canopy, was a figure unlike any Elias had seen before. She was small, no taller than a human child, but her skin glowed faintly, like the surface of a pearl. Her limbs were thin, fragile-looking, almost too delicate to hold her body upright. Her hair floated around her in gentle waves, shimmering in colors Elias could barely name. Soft silver and pale lilac intertwined like threads of light. She was crouched on the moss-covered ground, trembling slightly as she tried to move. Each movement seemed to cost her immense effort. Elias approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I mean no harm." He knew that alien life often reacted to humans with fear, curiosity, or both. The girl's ears, or whatever structures on her head functioned as ears, twitched at his voice. She froze, her glowing eyes wide, reflecting both fear and curiosity. He crouched down, keeping his hands visible. "I'm Elias," he said. "I think you're hurt, or maybe just tired. Can I help you?" He extended his hand slowly, not expecting her to take it. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as if she could see into his thoughts. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, ever so slowly, she reached out with a trembling hand and touched his. Her skin was cooler than he expected, almost like the soft petals of a flower. The connection, simple as it was, made her glow a little brighter. Elias smiled gently. "See? I'm not going to hurt you." Her small lips parted and a sound emerged. Not words, but a soft, melodic murmur that sounded almost like a song without meaning. Elias listened carefully, noting the rhythm and tone, realizing it was her way of communicating. She repeated the sound, and he responded with a series of gentle tones from his own voice, trying to establish a pattern. Slowly, she seemed to understand. She moved closer, her hand still resting lightly on his, and allowed him to examine her. It was clear she was fragile in ways that transcended appearance. Her bones seemed thinner than a human child's, and the slightest misstep could have caused her serious harm, yet her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity. Elias had read reports of her kind before. Delicate beings capable of remarkable perception and subtle powers, but often unable to survive the roughness of their own environment. The colony had never encountered one in person, and now he understood why they were so rare. Gently, he led her to a clearing he had prepared earlier, a safe space with soft moss and woven shelters designed to support delicate life. He placed a few luminescent fruits on a flat stone and gestured for her to eat. She hesitated, but hunger won over fear, and she cautiously took a piece, savoring it in small bites. Elias watched her carefully, noting every movement, every blink, every sign of discomfort. Her survival depended not just on nourishment, but on a careful environment that allowed her to rest and regain strength. Days passed, and a silent routine formed. Elias spoke to her in soft tones, sang gentle songs, and drew pictures to communicate ideas. Slowly, she began to respond, not in words, but in gestures, glances, and the faint glow that seemed to intensify when she felt safe. He named her Lyra, after the constellation of stars that reminded him of her shimmering presence. Lyra, he decided, was perfect for this fragile life he had been entrusted with. Lyra showed signs of intelligence that went beyond human expectations. She could sense patterns in the forest, noticing which plants needed water or which vines would provide shade without being too heavy. She would point and hum in ways that guided Elias toward solutions he would never have discovered alone. Her abilities, delicate yet precise, complemented his own human skills. Where his technology could measure and analyze, her intuition provided insight that machines could not replicate. But their relationship was not just about utility. It was built on mutual care, patience, and trust. Elias learned to read the subtle signals of her mood, how the intensity of her glow changed, the flicker of her eyelids, the tiny shift of her posture. Lyra, in turn, seemed to understand his patience and gentleness. She would reach for his hand in moments of fear, lean against him when exhausted, and occasionally let out a sound that Elias interpreted as laughter, a delicate, musical trill that filled the clearing with warmth. Elias also discovered the social dynamics of her species. Lyra's kind thrived in large communities, yet their fragility often made them vulnerable. They moved slowly, and any disruption could injure them. Lyra, in particular, seemed too delicate even for her own kind. She had been separated from her group, likely left behind because she could not keep pace. Elias felt a pang of sorrow at imagining a community too harsh for one so gentle, so uniquely brilliant, and yet he understood that his presence could make a difference. One evening, as the twin suns of Aradia 7 began to set, casting long ribbons of gold and pink across the forest floor, Elias and Lyra sat together near a small pool. She reached out, touching the water's surface lightly. Ripples spread, reflecting the twin suns and her glow together. Elias mirrored her gesture, and for a few moments, it was as if the universe itself acknowledged their bond, a human and an alien, connected through care and understanding. "Lyra," Elias said softly, "you're safe here. I promise I'll keep you safe." He did not know if she understood the words, but the gentle cadence, the warmth in his voice, seemed enough. She leaned slightly against him, her glow brightening as if to affirm that she trusted him. In that quiet moment, the forest itself seemed to exhale, acknowledging that something unusual and beautiful had begun. By the end of the first week, Elias realized that Lyra was more than just a fragile alien. She represented a new kind of partnership, one where humans could protect, nurture, and learn from life forms whose abilities were subtle yet profound. Her presence challenged him to think beyond science alone. It demanded empathy, creativity, and patience, and in return, Lyra offered him insight into a world that no human had ever fully understood. The clearing became their sanctuary. Elias crafted simple tools suited to Lyra's delicate touch: soft brushes for tending plants, lightweight containers for carrying water, and small bridges across streams that she could cross safely. Each innovation strengthened their bond, and each day brought small joys, shared meals, quiet songs, and the simple pleasure of being together in a world that was at once alien and familiar. Yet, beneath the serenity, Elias knew this was only the beginning. Lyra's fragility meant that any misstep could have serious consequences. The challenge was not just to keep her alive, but to help her thrive. And as he watched her carefully balance on a mossy log, reaching out to touch a glowing flower, he realized that the future of this delicate alien life depended not only on science, but on the uniquely human qualities of patience, care, and love. Elias smiled. Whatever lay ahead, he knew he would face it with her. Lyra, too, seemed to understand this unspoken promise, for she reached up and took his hand once more, her fingers cool and soft against his, a silent bond that neither words nor species could define. In that moment, he understood the truth of the title he had once whispered to himself. She might be too delicate for her own kind, but for him, she was perfect. Days passed in a rhythm that seemed to belong only to the two of them. Elias had settled into a routine of observation and care, while Lyra, the delicate alien girl, grew more confident in her movements and more responsive to his presence. She had begun exploring the clearing more freely, reaching out to touch the glowing plants, listening to the subtle hum of the forest, and mimicking Elias's gestures. Each day, Elias noticed the small miracles of her adaptability and her gentle intelligence. Lyra had developed a fascination with the forest itself. She would crouch beside a tiny plant, tracing the veins in its leaves with her slender fingers, and hum quietly, as if speaking in a language only the plants could understand. Elias observed her carefully. Her ability to sense the life around her was remarkable. Sometimes when she touched a leaf, it would shimmer slightly brighter, as though responding to her presence. Elias often wondered if this was some kind of innate ability unique to her kind, something humans could only begin to understand. He decided to integrate this gift into their daily lives. Elias began showing Lyra how humans interacted with their tools, not with force but with intention. He demonstrated how to carry water carefully, how to measure soil without crushing it, and how to plant seeds so that their roots could grow undisturbed. Lyra watched intently, learning not through spoken instruction but through observation and gentle imitation. Her learning was quiet, thoughtful, and precise. Every mistake she made was minor, and she corrected herself quickly as if guided by some inner intuition. It was during one of these sessions that Elias noticed something extraordinary. As Lyra carefully placed a seedling into the soil, the plant's leaves unfurled slightly faster than normal, and the colors of its veins deepened, as though energized. Elias blinked in surprise. He had heard of alien species capable of influencing plant life in subtle ways, but seeing it firsthand was something different. He knelt beside her, gently touching the same plant. He felt warmth, not heat but a comforting energy that made the soil feel alive. "You're remarkable, Lyra," he said softly. "I think the forest likes you." Lyra tilted her head, a faint trill escaping her lips, which Elias interpreted as a laugh. It was light and musical, echoing softly among the trees. He smiled. Even though she could not speak his language, she understood praise, warmth, and encouragement. Their communication had become a delicate dance of gestures, sounds, and unspoken understanding. Elias often felt that he learned as much from her as she learned from him. To make life easier and safer for her, Elias had begun designing small innovations. He created a soft canopy over their clearing, woven from lightweight materials that allowed sunlight to filter through but protected Lyra from harsh weather. He designed tiny portable platforms so she could reach the plants she loved without straining herself. Each new invention required patience and care because Lyra's delicate hands could not handle heavy or rough materials. Watching her interact with these tools brought Elias a quiet joy he had not known in years. The humans in the colony began to notice changes in Elias as well. He moved with a gentleness and mindfulness that was rare even among trained scientists. Colony children would sometimes peek into his clearing and see Lyra glowing softly among the plants, her hands tracing the delicate veins of leaves, while Elias worked quietly nearby. The sight was magical, and it inspired the colony in ways he could not have anticipated. They began to view Lyra not as an alien to be feared or studied, but as a living bridge between their world and the mysteries of Aradia 7. One morning, as the twin suns rose together, casting long ribbons of light across the forest, Elias and Lyra ventured farther than usual. The path was lined with towering mushrooms that glowed faintly in blues and pinks, and delicate vines twisted around the trees in elegant patterns. Lyra moved carefully, sometimes resting against Elias when a step seemed too risky. Elias held her hand, guiding her, but allowing her to explore in her own way. They came upon a small pond, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the sky and forest above. Lyra crouched at the edge, her glowing fingers skimming the water lightly. The ripples spread outward, causing reflections of light to dance across the surrounding foliage. Elias joined her, dipping his hand into the water. "The forest seems alive in a way humans have never seen before," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with wonder, and hummed a melody that resonated with the gentle sounds of the pond. It was in moments like this that Elias realized the depth of her intelligence and her perception. She was not just delicate in body, she was delicate in spirit, attuned to beauty and harmony in ways humans often overlooked. And yet, despite her fragility, she had courage. She explored the unknown, touched the delicate, and observed the world with curiosity and precision. It struck him that she was teaching him more about life and patience than he could have ever learned from books or machines. Lyra's abilities also began to manifest in practical ways. One day, while observing a patch of wilting flowers, she traced her fingers across the soil and the plants. Slowly the leaves perked up, colors returning with subtle brilliance. Elias watched in awe. It was clear that her touch, her presence, had a restorative effect on living things. This discovery filled him with both wonder and a sense of responsibility. The forest had accepted her, and through her, humans could learn to care for life in ways they had never imagined. The bond between them deepened. Lyra began seeking Elias's guidance, and he, in turn, relied on her instincts and intuition. Together, they experimented with planting techniques, irrigation methods, and ways to balance the ecosystem of the clearing without disturbing its natural harmony. Each day brought new discoveries. A plant species that had been dormant for weeks bloomed under their care. A tiny insect, previously invisible to human sensors, emerged and began pollinating flowers in the clearing. It was as if their combined presence, human ingenuity, and alien intuition had awakened the forest itself. But beyond their work, there were quiet, tender moments. Elias taught Lyra to mimic human gestures like clapping softly or tilting her head in curiosity. She responded with a natural grace, adding her own alien inflections. Sometimes they would lie on the moss together, watching the twin suns rise or set, sharing silence that was richer than any conversation. Lyra would hum gentle melodies, and Elias would respond with soft songs or whistles. Their melodies intertwined with the forest's natural sounds, creating a harmony that felt sacred and alive. Elias also discovered the depth of her emotions. Lyra reacted to music, colors, and even small acts of kindness with variations in her glow and tiny musical sounds. She seemed to understand joy, curiosity, and affection in a way that was both innocent and profound. Elias realized that the fragility he had first noticed was not weakness. It was sensitivity, a heightened awareness of the world around her. Her delicate nature allowed her to perceive details, patterns, and emotions that even humans with advanced technology often overlooked. One afternoon, Elias presented her with a small puzzle, a set of delicate, floating spheres that needed to be arranged without touching the ground. Lyra studied them carefully, her glowing fingers moving with precision and grace. Within moments, she arranged the spheres perfectly, causing them to emit soft harmonic tones. Elias clapped softly, thrilled by her ingenuity. "You're extraordinary, Lyra," he said. She responded with a melodic trill, a sound that made him smile from the depths of his heart. Through these small exercises, Elias began to realize the broader potential of Lyra's presence. Her abilities were not merely unique, they were transformative. Humans often relied on strength, speed, and technology, but Lyra showed him that patience, gentleness, and intuition could achieve remarkable results. The clearing became a living laboratory of collaboration, a place where human and alien worked together to cultivate life, harmony, and understanding. The weeks passed, and with each passing day, Lyra grew more confident. She ventured further into the forest, exploring new paths while Elias followed, ensuring her safety. She began mimicking small human routines, gathering water, arranging leaves, and even attempting to imitate Elias's careful scientific notes through small sketches and symbols. Elias encouraged her, teaching her not to fear mistakes and showing her that curiosity and learning could coexist with delicacy. By the end of part 2, their connection was unshakable. Lyra had become more than a fragile alien girl dependent on Elias. She was a partner in discovery, a teacher of subtle perception, and a source of joy for the entire colony. Humans who visited the clearing left with a new sense of wonder, inspired by her gentle intelligence and the harmony she created with Elias. Together, they had shown that life, delicate or robust, could flourish when nurtured with patience, empathy, and creativity. Elias often reflected on the truth he had once whispered. She might be too delicate for her own kind, but with humans, and with him, she was perfect. And as Lyra glowed softly beside him, exploring the forest and guiding him with her intuition, he knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would transform not just their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The days on Aradia 7 passed with a quiet rhythm, but the forest was never static. Even in a world that seemed peaceful, nature had its own ways of testing patience and skill. One morning, as the twin suns rose together in the sky, Elias noticed the forest behaving differently. The soft hum of insects had become louder, almost restless. The trees swayed more than usual, and the normally placid pond rippled as if something beneath its surface had stirred. Lyra, sitting beside him on the mossy clearing, tilted her head and emitted a soft trill, her glow flickering slightly. Elias reached out to her hand, feeling the warmth of her presence steadying him. He had learned to read her signals carefully. Her subtle reactions often warned him of things he could not yet perceive. Shifts in the ecosystem, changes in air, pressure, or the gentle tremor of soil that human instruments might miss. Today, the forest had a challenge for them. A sudden storm was approaching, brought on by Aradia 7's unusual weather patterns. It would not be violent in the way humans often imagined storms, but the heavy rainfall could flood the lower areas, damage delicate plants, and threaten fragile species. Elias had prepared for emergencies, but he also knew that Lyra's insight would be invaluable. He looked at her. "We'll work together, Lyra. We can protect the clearing." She blinked slowly and reached out her hand, touching his in reassurance. They began by moving quickly but carefully through the clearing, placing lightweight shelters over vulnerable plants. Lyra guided Elias toward areas that needed attention most, pointing with her glowing fingers and humming softly. Where a human might have relied solely on measurement and tools, Lyra used intuition, sensing the moisture in the soil and the strength of the roots. Together they created a network of small protective coverings that would shield the most delicate flora from the approaching rain. As the first droplets began to fall, Elias noticed Lyra's focus sharpen. She moved gracefully, balancing on small rocks and fallen branches, placing leaves to divert water and reinforcing the shelters with tiny, flexible vines. Her glow seemed to pulse with energy, and Elias realized that her presence had an effect not only on plants but also on the forest itself. It was subtle, a strengthening of the flora's natural resilience, but it was enough to make a noticeable difference. Elias marveled at her ability. Humans often relied on machines to monitor and protect life, but Lyra's intuition surpassed technology. Where sensors might have failed to notice a vulnerable plant, her senses anticipated the needs of every living thing around them. He felt a deep sense of gratitude. The forest was alive in a new way, responding to her care, and he was privileged to witness it. As the storm intensified, they turned their attention to the pond at the edge of the clearing. Lyra approached it, cautiously, sensing how the rising water might overflow into the surrounding areas. She traced her fingers across the water's surface, and Elias noticed a subtle change. The ripples calmed slightly, and the edges of the pond seemed to resist the rising level, as though the water itself recognized her guidance. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, but he trusted her instincts completely. Together they reinforced the pond's boundaries with lightweight barriers and carefully placed stones, ensuring that the water would flow safely without damaging the delicate plants nearby. Lyra hummed softly, a musical sound that blended with the rain, and Elias realized that her presence brought a sense of harmony even to natural forces. It was as if she could communicate with life itself, encouraging it to thrive despite challenges. After hours of careful work, the storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the forest refreshed and vibrant. The shelters had held, the pond remained contained, and the plants, flowers, and tiny creatures had survived intact. Elias looked around in awe. The forest had weathered the storm, not by human technology alone, but through the partnership between a human and an alien girl whose delicate nature was perfectly suited to the task. Lyra, glowing faintly in the post-storm light, approached him. She leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but calm, and emitted a soft trill. Elias stroked her hair gently. "You did it, Lyra. We did it together." She blinked slowly, her glow brightening as if affirming their shared achievement. It was a quiet celebration, but for Elias it felt monumental. They had faced a challenge, relied on each other, and succeeded in a way that no human alone could have accomplished. The storm had also left small opportunities in its wake. Fallen branches created natural bridges across streams, new pools had formed for aquatic life, and seeds had been scattered to areas previously barren. Elias and Lyra began exploring these changes, noting how the forest itself seemed eager to adapt and grow. Lyra would reach out, touching a newly sprouted flower or a young sapling, and Elias would observe subtle shifts. The leaves turned slightly toward her. The stems straightened and tiny buds seemed to open in recognition. Elias realized that Lyra's presence could transform the forest over time. She was not just a delicate being in need of protection. She was a catalyst for growth, a gentle force that encouraged life to flourish. Her abilities complemented human, creativity, and problem-solving in a way that no machine or technology could replicate. The clearing had become a living example of how humans and alien life could coexist, support each other, and create something extraordinary. Word of their achievements began to spread through the colony. Scientists, botanists, and curious children visited the clearing to witness Lyra's work firsthand. She welcomed them cautiously, guided by Elias, and slowly began interacting with humans beyond him. Her curiosity was boundless, and she seemed fascinated by the ways humans could solve problems using tools, imagination, and cooperation. Elias noticed that her confidence grew with each interaction, yet she remained gentle and observant, never losing her delicate nature. One afternoon, the colony's engineers approached with a request. They were working on a new project to cultivate fragile plant species across the planet, but they had struggled to keep them alive. Elias suggested involving Lyra, not as a mere assistant, but as a partner whose intuition and sensitivity could guide the project. Lyra seemed to understand immediately. She touched the engineers' hands lightly, glowed softly, and began directing them to place plants where they could thrive. The results were astonishing. Plants that had previously wilted in human care flourished under her guidance. Through these experiences, Elias saw a profound truth. Humanity often relied on strength, technology, and control to shape the world. But Lyra showed him that patience, empathy, and understanding could achieve equally powerful results. She reminded him that there was a different kind of strength and delicacy, a kind of intelligence that recognized patterns, relationships, and life in ways humans had often overlooked. Lyra also began to develop her own curiosity about humans. She watched them laugh, work, and play, and attempted to mimic their gestures, creating a small bridge of understanding between species. Elias encouraged her, teaching her songs, simple games, and the joy of shared discovery. She responded with a glowing vibrance, and the colony began to see her as a symbol of harmony, a living example of how life could be nurtured and celebrated rather than conquered or controlled. One evening, after another day of careful work, Elias and Lyra sat together at the edge of the pond. The water reflected the soft light of the setting suns, and fireflies danced above the surface. Elias watched her trace patterns in the water, creating ripples that shimmered like liquid light. He felt a deep sense of gratitude. Lyra had taught him patience, attentiveness, and the joy of small, careful actions that could have far-reaching consequences. In turn, he had provided her safety, guidance, and companionship. Their bond was no longer just one of caretaker and fragile being. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared purpose. Elias realized that humanity's greatest strength was not just its technology or intelligence, but its ability to empathize, adapt, and collaborate with life in all its forms. Lyra, delicate and luminous, embodied that potential in a way that words could not fully capture. By the end of Part 3, the clearing had transformed into a thriving sanctuary. Fragile plants, small creatures, and delicate life forms all found safety and care under the combined guidance of Elias and Lyra. The colony looked to them not just for scientific knowledge but for inspiration. They had shown that humans could nurture life in ways that no other species could, and that even the most fragile beings could flourish when met with understanding, patience, and cooperation. Elias looked at Lyra, her small hand resting in his, and felt a quiet pride. She had faced challenges she never could have endured alone, and she had done so with grace, intelligence, and courage. She was too delicate for her own kind, yes, but with humans, and with him, she was perfect. And as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long ribbons of light across the forest, Elias knew that their story was far from over. Together, they would continue to explore, nurture, and transform the world around them, proving that humanity's empathy, creativity, and care could create wonders no one had ever imagined. The forest clearing had never looked so alive. Every plant seemed to thrive, every flower glowed in soft colors, and tiny creatures darted among the trees without fear. The storm from the previous week had passed, leaving behind a sense of renewal, as if the forest itself had been cleansed and awakened. Elias stood at the edge of the clearing, looking at the delicate alien girl, Lyra, who was crouched near a cluster of bioluminescent mushrooms, her fingers tracing patterns that caused the fungi to glow brighter. Lyra's presence had become an integral part of the clearing. She moved with a grace that was almost musical, her glowing eyes scanning every leaf, every stem, every creature. She paused occasionally to hum softly, and the forest seemed to respond, as if acknowledging her care. Elias had long stopped thinking of her as fragile in a limiting sense. She was delicate, yes, but that delicacy allowed her to perceive the world in ways humans never could. Her sensitivity was a gift, one that had transformed the clearing into a sanctuary of life and harmony. The colony had taken notice. Scientists, children, and explorers often visited to observe and learn. They brought new species of delicate plants, and under Lyra's guidance they flourished. The clearing had become a living laboratory, not just for scientific study, but for demonstrating the possibilities of empathy and cooperation between species. Humans were learning as much from Lyra as she was learning from them, and the results were breathtaking. Elias approached her, carrying a small, handcrafted basket of seedlings. "Lyra, I think these might like the new soil patch we prepared," he said gently. She turned her glowing eyes toward him and extended her hand. As he passed the basket to her, her fingers brushed his lightly. A faint warmth spread through him, a reminder of the unique bond they shared. It was not just trust, but something deeper. Understanding, companionship, and mutual respect. And mutual. Lyra carefully arranged the seedlings, pausing to hum each time she placed one. Elias observed how the plants responded almost immediately, their stems straightening and their leaves expanding as if greeting her. "You really have a gift, Lyra," he said softly. She tilted her head and emitted a short musical trill, which he took as her way of laughing. Elias smiled, marveling at how she could express joy without words, yet communicate so fully. One afternoon, as the colony's engineers brought a new set of fragile aquatic plants to the clearing, they looked to Lyra for guidance. She crouched by the pond, her glowing fingers skimming the surface, sensing the water's currents and depth. She directed them gently, indicating which plants should be placed where for optimal growth. The engineers followed her directions carefully, amazed at how her intuition complemented their technical knowledge. Where humans relied on measurements and calculations, Lyra relied on perception, pattern, and connection. Together, they created a thriving ecosystem that had previously seemed impossible. It was during these collaborative moments that Elias truly understood the human role in this partnership. Humans had the tools, the patience, and the ability to act on complex plans. Lyra had the sensitivity, perception, and subtle power to guide them in ways that no machine could replicate. Together, they achieved something extraordinary, a model of coexistence where humanity's creativity and empathy amplified the strengths of another species rather than imposing dominance. Lyra's integration into human life grew slowly but steadily. She began imitating simple human routines, like gathering food, arranging flowers, and observing experiments. Elias encouraged her curiosity, teaching her small games, songs, and problem-solving exercises. She responded eagerly, her glow brightening as she learned new patterns and ideas. Children from the colony sometimes joined her, sitting cross-legged in the moss and learning from her gentle methods. Elias watched with pride, realizing that Lyra had become a bridge between species, a symbol of what humans could achieve when guided by compassion and intelligence. One day, Elias suggested a small experiment. He had prepared a series of intricate patterns in the soil, each designed to test Lyra's ability to guide growth and perception. Lyra approached the first pattern cautiously, tracing her fingers lightly over the lines. The plants responded immediately, bending and adjusting as if acknowledging her touch. She moved from one pattern to the next, humming softly, and each one came to life in vibrant, delicate harmony. The colony members watching erupted in quiet amazement. Technology alone could never have produced such results. Human care combined with Lyra's subtle gifts had achieved something extraordinary. As the suns began to set, casting golden and pink ribbons of light across the clearing, Elias and Lyra walked along a small path they had created together. She reached out to touch his hand, and he took it gently, guiding her along uneven terrain. The path led to a newly built observation deck, a small platform overlooking the clearing. From here, one could see the forest's intricate balance, plants thriving, insects and small creatures moving safely among them, and the soft glow of Lyra's influence evident everywhere. "This is what we've built together," Elias said softly, his eyes following her movements. Lyra glanced at him and then back at the forest, her glow brightening as if to say she understood. Elias realized that the clearing was more than just a project. It was a living testament to what humans could achieve when they combined creativity, patience, and empathy with the natural gifts of another being. In the weeks that followed, the clearing became a center for learning and inspiration. Scientists documented the methods of collaboration. Children learned to observe without harming, and explorers marveled at how a fragile being could have such a profound impact. Lyra thrived in this environment. She learned new human skills while sharing her abilities, creating a dynamic exchange of knowledge that benefited everyone. Elias often reflected on the journey they had taken together. When he first found her alone in the forest, he had seen only fragility. But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, he realized that her delicacy was her strength. It allowed her to perceive life in subtle ways, to guide humans with intuition and care, and to transform the world around her. Her presence reminded him that strength was not always measured in power, size, or speed. Sometimes it was measured in sensitivity, awareness, and the ability to nurture. Lyra's influence extended beyond the clearing. The colony began to adopt her methods, approaching delicate life with gentleness and observation rather than force. They learned that human ingenuity was most effective when combined with care and understanding. Lyra became a symbol not of dependence but of collaboration, a living example of how humans could protect, nurture, and inspire life across the galaxy. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Elias and Lyra sat quietly at the edge of the clearing. The water reflected the soft light, the fireflies glimmered above, and the gentle hum of the forest surrounded them. Lyra rested her head lightly on his shoulder, her glow soft but steady. Elias felt a profound sense of gratitude and fulfillment. He had set out to protect her, but in doing so, he had learned how to see the world anew. "You've done more than I ever imagined, Lyra," he whispered. She turned her glowing eyes toward him, emitting a soft trill that he understood perfectly. She had done it all alongside him. The bond between them was unbreakable, built on trust, care, and mutual respect. They had faced challenges, discovered wonders, and created life where it might have faltered. Together, they had shown that humans could achieve extraordinary things, not through force but through empathy, understanding, and collaboration. As darkness settled over the forest, Elias held Lyra's hand, feeling the gentle warmth of her presence. The clearing was alive with soft light, delicate movements, and subtle energies, a world transformed not by dominance, but by care. Lyra had found a home among humans, not because she had to survive, but because she had flourished. She had become a partner, a teacher, and a friend. And in that moment, Elias understood fully what he had known all along. She might have been too delicate for her own kind, too sensitive to thrive in the harshness of her species' world. But, with him, with humans who approached life with patience, creativity, and empathy, she was perfect. The forest, the clearing, and the bond between them were proof of what humanity could achieve. A world where life, no matter how fragile, could thrive and inspire. Lyra looked up at him, her glow steady, and he smiled. The future stretched before them, filled with possibilities, discoveries, and shared moments. Together they had created something enduring, a sanctuary of life, understanding, and hope. And as the stars began to shimmer in the sky above Aradia 7, Elias knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. Humanity's capacity for care combined with the delicate gifts of Lyra could nurture life across the universe, and that was a story worth living.